The power and precarity of the Tang Empress in the grand tapestry of the Tang Dynasty's illustrious history. The figure of the Empress stood as a symbol of both authority and vulnerability. Empresses in this golden age of Chinese civilization wielded influence that often transcended the corridors of courtly etiquette, yet their power was dangerously fragile, constantly hanging by a delicate thread woven from political maneuvering, familial loyalties, and the ever-looming spectre of palace intrigue. To understand the complex position of the Tang Empress, one must first grasp the hierarchical structure that defined this imperial society. While the emperor held supreme authority, deified in Confucian ideology as the Son of Heaven, his consort often possessed a nuanced form of sway. Empresses were both symbolic embodiments of the dynasty's legitimacy and active players within the political machinations that sustained or destabilized the court. Their influence could sway imperial edicts, guide succession, and even orchestrate alliances, but it was by no means assured nor absolute. The empress, by tradition, was a figure of utmost dignity and grace, selected through rigorous court procedures that prioritized noble lineage, political alliances, and perceived virtue. Once crowned, she was ensconced within the hallowed halls of the palace, a bastion of power seemingly insulated from the chaos outside. But the walls of this imperial sanctuary also concealed treacherous currents. Her position was often challenged by rivals within the court, ambitious concubines, powerful officials, or even her own children. This precarity was vividly illustrated in the life stories of many Tang empresses who navigated a treacherous landscape where favor was fleeting and betrayal lurked behind every ornate pillar. Their influence depended heavily on their relationship with the emperor, but also on their ability to secure patronage and manipulate court factions. A single misstep, an ill-timed rebuff, a suspicious alliance, could lead to their downfall, exile, or worse, death. One of the defining features of the Tang Empress's power was her role in succession and court politics. While the emperor ostensibly held the final say in appointing heirs, empresses cultivated alliances with powerful court officials or members of the aristocracy to safeguard their position and their offspring's claim. Success in these endeavors could elevate her status, positioning her as a true co-ruler in the shadows, wielding influence over imperial policies and appointments. Conversely, failure or perceived disloyalty often resulted in ruin, with some empresses replaced or cast aside by rival factions eager to install more controllable figures at court. However, this political influence came with immense risk. Empresses who overstepped or became too independent, challenging imperial authority or attempting to manipulate succession, were often seen as threats. The court's ruthless power struggles meant that even the most revered empress was not immune to sudden downfall. Stories from the era recount empresses who, after gaining prominence, were abruptly dethroned, accused of witchcraft, conspiracy, or disloyalty, and subsequently eliminated, sometimes executed, other times quietly concealed from history. The personal vulnerability of the empress was further heightened by courtly gender dynamics. Unlike the emperor, whose authority was sometimes reinforced by divine decree, the empress's power was softer, based on influence rather than command. This indirect power could be eroded easily through scandals, whispers of treachery, or leaks of palace secrets. The constant threat of poisoning, orchestrated elimination, or exile cast a shadow over her reign, making her a formidable yet fragile figure whose life could be unraveled swiftly. In the context of the story of the forgotten Tang Queen, this duality becomes even more stark. She wielded influence that both commanded admiration and evoked jealousy. Her intelligence, political acumen, and the trust she built among allies made her a formidable presence in court, yet her very position made her vulnerable. The whispers of dissent, the plotting of rivals, and the secret fears of her own son, who would later become her assassin, highlight the terrifying precariousness of her power. Ultimately, the tale underscores that in the realm of Tang imperial politics, power was a delicate dance. Empresses, despite their stature, were often pawns in a game of chess where kings and queens played for high stakes. Their influence could shape history, but so could their downfall, sometimes betrayed by the very people closest to them. In the dim corridors of history, few eras evoke the allure and treachery of the Tang Dynasty, a period that shone brightly as China's golden age, but was also veiled in shadows of political secrecy and deadly ambition. It was an age where emperors ruled with divine authority, yet their courts teemed with scheming princes, cunning officials, and clandestine operatives whose whispers toppled empires and silenced queens. To understand the haunting tale of the forgotten queen murdered by her own son, we must first delve into the intricate web of power and intrigue that defined the Tang era. The Tang Dynasty, spanning from 618 to 907 CE, was an epoch marked by remarkable cultural achievements, poetry that still echoes through the ages, advancements in art and technology, and broad territorial expansion. Its capital, Chang'an, was a glittering metropolis, bustling with scholars, merchants, and nobles from distant lands. Yet amid this prosperity lurked a ruthless undercurrent. Palace conspiracies simmered beneath the surface, fueled by shifting alliances and fierce rivalry for the throne. At the heart of this shadowy world was the imperial court, a labyrinthine maze of chambers where loyalty was often a facade and betrayal lurked behind every corner. The emperor's word was law, but behind that law, a silent battle raged. Who would ascend, who would be cast down, and who would survive long enough to see another dawn? Power was maintained not just through displays of strength, but often through danger, manipulation, and most insidiously, poison. Within this perilous landscape, queens held a unique yet perilous position. While they could wield influence through patronage and familial alliances, they were also potential threats to ambitious sons or rival factions. Their proximity to the throne was a double-edged sword. Their favor could secure their children's future, but their suspicion could invite deadly plots. In this environment, poison became a favored instrument of political murder, a silent assassin that could remove a rival without open conflict, discreetly and ruthlessly. The story of the queen in question unfolds against this tumultuous backdrop, a noblewoman whose intelligence and political acumen made her formidable, yet whose influence also rendered her a target. Her rise to power was marked by careful alliances, strategic marriages, and her ability to navigate the treacherous palace politics with a deft touch. She was loved by some for her wisdom, feared by others for her wit, and hated by those who saw her as an obstacle to their ambitions. Her relationship with her son, the prince, was complex. To the outside world, they appeared close, an image carefully cultivated at court functions and family ceremonies. Yet beneath this veneer, tension simmered. The prince, ambitious and ruthless, was haunted by the desire to secure his place on the throne, a desire that increasingly brought him into conflict with his mother's political influence. Despite moments of apparent filial affection, whispers spread of secret meetings, veiled threats, and clandestine plots aimed at weakening her position. Palace intrigue during this period was a relentless game of shadows. Court officials, eunuchs, and advisors often served as pawns manipulated by darker forces, ambitious ministers who sought favor, poison artisans specializing in covert delivery, and secret messengers working beneath the emperor's gaze. The queen's closest allies, perhaps blind to the danger or loyal beyond doubt, often dismissed the growing suspicion around her safety. In these tense days leading up to her death, the atmosphere was thick with paranoia. Rumors of treachery circulated through the silk-clad halls, plots to dethrone the emperor, alliances formed and broken overnight, and whispers of insidious poisons hidden within the splendor of court feasts. It was during one such banquet that tragedy struck. A formal gathering meant to reinforce unity turned into a scene of silent death. The queen, unaware of the danger, partook in a delicately prepared dish, a cultural hallmark of refined Tang court hospitality. But beneath the tender exterior, a lethal substance lurked, her son's calculated act. An insidious mixture of herbs and poisons passed into her meal. Her face, once regal and composed, twisted in agony as the poison took hold, her body racked with pain, her mind slipping into confusion and terror in her final moments. Eyewitnesses, possibly courtiers or attendants, later spoke of her agonized gasp, her desperate attempt to understand the betrayal lurking within her own court. Her death was swift yet gruesome, a silent, unseen execution meant to remove her influence once and for all. Evidence increasingly pointed to her son's hand, perhaps hidden poisons, perhaps crafted herbs destined to be deadly when consumed. The aftermath was a tumult of whispers and suspicions. Court records, poetic lamentations, and clandestine letters hinted at the truth behind her demise. Modern forensic techniques have pieced together fragments of the story, residue analyses on recovered artifacts, and deciphered ancient texts suggest a carefully concealed scheme of poisoning, meticulously planned and executed to keep its secrets hidden from the emperor's eyes. The political fallout was immediate. The palace descended into chaos as factions vied for control, distrust festered among courtiers, and the legitimacy of her son's rule was questioned. Her death, once a guarded secret, became a whispered ghost haunting the corridors of power, an open wound buried beneath layers of court protocol and silken veneer. Yet her story endured beyond the chaos, becoming a cautionary tale about the destructive hunger for power and the perilous game of courtly intrigue. The Queen's tragic end set in motion a chain of events that would influence future succession disputes, court policies, and perceptions of loyalty and treachery within the jade walls of the Tang court. Today, her story remains shrouded in mystery, a haunting reminder of how shadows of ambition can eclipse even the brightest of empires. In the dark corners of history, where secrets are buried beneath layers of time, the forgotten Queen's tale persists, a testament to the perilous dance of betrayal and the deadly cost of power. In the labyrinthine corridors of the Tang Dynasty palace, few figures exemplify the complex interplay of power, intellect, and ambition as vividly as the Queen and her ambitious son. Their story is woven with threads of love and betrayal, trust and treachery, revealing a dark facet of imperial life where even the most seemingly unassailable figures could be brought low by their closest kin. The Queen, whose full name has long been lost to history, was more than mere royalty. She was a woman of formidable intelligence and strategic insight. Coming from a noble lineage, she ascended rapidly through the court's treacherous ranks, her political acumen earning her the admiration of some and the suspicion of others. Highly educated, she was an eloquent diplomat and a keen judge of character, capable of deftly maneuvering through palace intrigues. Her influence extended beyond her gender. She was a power broker behind the scenes, shaping policies, advocating for alliances, and steering the imperial court toward her vision of stability. Her personal story was equally compelling. Raised in a court known for its machinations, she understood the deadly game of alliances and betrayals from an early age. Her marriage to the emperor was not just a union of two people, but a calculated alliance designed to strengthen her family's position. Yet, her true power stemmed from her political savvy and her ability to read the subtle shifts of court factions. She maintained a delicate balance, being respected and loved by some, yet feared by others. However, beneath her poised exterior lay a woman acutely aware of the dangers lurking around every corner. She knew her influence could easily threaten the ambitions of other court officials or even her own son, who, despite their apparent closeness, harbored his own dark aspirations. Her son, the prince, was a man defined by ruthless ambition and an unyielding desire for the throne. From a young age, he exhibited traits of calculated cunning and a willingness to manipulate circumstances to his advantage. Raised amidst political plotting, he learned early on that power did not come freely, and that sometimes purity of love was sacrificed on the altar of ambition. He was charming, charismatic even, but beneath that veneer lurked a calculating mind eager to supplant his mother's influence. His relationship with his mother appeared tender on the surface, an idealized portrait of filial piety, but the truth was far more tangled. Behind closed doors, whispers tell of heated disputes, clandestine meetings, and subtle power struggles. The prince felt the weight of his mother's influence and perceived her political reach as an obstacle to his own plans. While he outwardly expressed respect, inwardly he grappled with dark thoughts, how to consolidate power, how to eliminate rivals, and crucially, how to neutralize what he saw as the greatest threat of all, his mother herself. His inner conflict was complex. On one hand, filial piety demanded loyalty and reverence. On the other, his ambitions shouted for control. This dichotomy made him a dangerous figure, capable of both genuine affection and calculated ruthlessness. Sources suggest he was torn between love for his mother and the seductive pull of power. Some court insiders speculate that this internal turmoil was his undoing, a mind capable of great loyalty, but also of lethal betrayal. The Queen, for her part, recognized the signs of her son's ambition, but believed she could direct his energy toward the stability of the empire. She sought to guide him, to counsel patience and wisdom, yet secretly she remained wary of his growing influence. Her political intelligence told her that in a palace so fraught with danger, trust was a luxury she could ill afford. She kept her own counsel, balancing her role as a nurturing mother with that of a shrewd political operator. Their relationship existed in a state of delicate tension. One moment, tender exchanges masked a deeper undercurrent of suspicion. The next, cold silences filled with unspoken fears. The Queen's intuition told her that her son's ambitions might someday threaten her very existence. She fortified her alliances, bolstered her influence, even as she tried to understand and perhaps soften her son's ruthless streak. Yet, the prince's ambition grew darker and more dangerous with each passing year. Lofty dreams of conquering the throne drove him forward, whispering promises of ultimate power. Internal conflicts fueled his secret plotting, and as rumors of treachery began to seep into the court, both mother and son sensed that a storm was brewing, one that could shatter their carefully constructed facades. The profiles of this pair, queen and heir, reveal a stark narrative of ambition's perilous path. The queen, possessed of sharp intellect and political finesse, understood the treacherous waters she navigated. Her ambitions, while rooted in palace diplomacy, were also soaked in a desire to secure her family's legacy. Her son's relentless pursuit of power, however, set him on a collision course with his mother, a trajectory that would eventually lead to betrayal, perhaps even death. In this deadly chess game, each move was calculated, each alliance a fleeting illusion of stability. The Queen's story emphasizes how even those closest to us can become our greatest threats when ambition blinds judgment and power corrupts hearts. The palace corridors echoed with hushed whispers and the soft shuffle of silken robes, a veritable theater of shadows where every word carried weight and every glance concealed a purpose. The Tang Dynasty court, renowned for its grandeur and cultural brilliance, also harbored a sinister undercurrent of intrigue, suspicion, and betrayal, a dance of deception choreographed by those desperate to secure their place in history or, more often, to survive the deadly game of power. In these opulent yet treacherous halls, alliances shifted like the silk banners fluttering in the wind. The Queen, a noblewoman of formidable wit and subtlety, had ingrained herself into the very fabric of court life. Her influence extended beyond her title. She was a master of diplomacy, nurturing friendships amongst the noble families, while deftly navigating the treacherous waters of court politics. Yet, beneath her poised exterior lurked a keen awareness of the myriad threats surrounding her, especially from those who viewed her as an obstacle to their own ambitions. The Emperor, her husband, was a figure caught between the imperatives of statecraft and the whispers of court factions. While he trusted his wife, he was also surrounded by palace officials and advisers whose loyalties were often ambiguous, some genuinely devoted, others covertly plotting her downfall. Every decree, every edict, seemed to carry with it the ghost of treachery, prompting the Queen to remain ever watchful. Meanwhile, her son, the prince, was a figure of mounting tension. Ambitious and ruthless, yet bound by complex filial emotions, he moved through courts with a calculating calm. To the untrained eye, he appeared loyal, even affectionate toward his mother, but beneath that veneer lay a tempest of conflicting desires. His eyes reflected a hunger for power that threatened to consume him, and critics whispered of his growing impatience, an impatience that could spark the kind of action that would forever change the course of history. Secret meetings became a common feature of palace life, held in dimly lit chambers or behind the heavy silk drapes of secluded courtyards. Courtiers and officials whispered forecasts of alliances and betrayals, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Rumors spread like wildfire, sometimes fabricated, other times rooted in truth, fueling the atmosphere of paranoia. Every meal, every gathering, was tinged with suspicion. Could the food be poisoned? Were the words spoken in confidence being overheard? The palace, once a symbol of stability, now resembled a chessboard where every move could be deadly. In the midst of this chaos, the Queen's keen intuition sensed the growing threat from her own bloodline. She noticed subtle changes in her son's demeanor, the guarded pauses before meetings, the furtive looks cast when he believed he was unobserved. She knew that her enemies might win through deception rather than open conflict, and so she prepared herself for the unthinkable. Treachery lurking behind a smile, poison concealed within a seemingly benign feast. The courtiers, poison artisans, and eunuchs who served in the palace played their silent roles in this elaborate dance. Some specialized in the meticulous handcrafting of clandestine poisons, concocting deadly mixtures so discreet that their presence was only detectable through careful residue analysis centuries later. Others, mere servants, unwittingly carried the final, lethal ingredients to their targets, oblivious to the lethal destiny awaiting their recipients. As tensions escalated, the court became a stage where masked faces of loyalty hid clandestine fears. At night, whispers of treachery curled like smoke in the dark corners, inflicting a pall of unease that seeped into the very stones of the palace. Every gesture, every word, now possibly a hint towards future treachery. The dance of deception was ongoing, each participant trying to conceal their true intentions behind fabricated smiles and demure politeness. Amidst this web of intrigue, the Queen's diplomatic finesse was both her strength and her vulnerability. She played her part expertly, feigning contentment at court banquets, exchanging veiled compliments, maintaining her influence over key factions, yet she remained acutely aware of the ever-present danger. Her intuition told her that treachery lurked not just on the fringes, but right within her own household. Every evening, as lanterns cast long shadows over the palace walls, the players in this deadly dance took their positions. Courtiers, servants, and the prince himself poised on the brink of decisive moves. And in this game of subtle power plays, trust was a fleeting illusion, an unreliable thread that could snap at any moment, plunging the court into chaos. The palace was alive with the unspoken tension of impending violence, where every moment could be the turning point, whether towards peaceful diplomacy or catastrophic betrayal. Like dancers moving in a carefully choreographed routine, every figure at court played their part, their actions pushing the narrative toward an inevitable climax. The grand hall was bathed in a muted amber glow, flickering candlelight casting long shadows across intricately carved silk draperies and gilded lacquered furniture. It was a night like many others in the immense palace, yet beneath the veneer of opulence tension simmered, an undercurrent of treachery that threatened to unravel the very foundation of power. Among the courtiers and officials assembled, none suspected that the evening's most deadly secret would be unveiled under the guise of celebration. The Queen, a woman of regal bearing and formidable intelligence, sat at the center of the banquet table, her eyes observant yet composed. She was known for her keen political insight and influence that stretched beyond her role as consort. Many whispered that her wisdom rivaled that of her husband, the reigning emperor. To her son, Prince Li Wei, she was both a beloved mother and a potential obstacle to his aspirations. Their relationship was complicated, affectionate on the surface, strained beneath it, each aware of the dangerous game they played with loyalty and ambition. On this night, as courtiers toasted, and the aroma of roasted meats and fragrant herbs filled the air, a subtle change lingered, an almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. The Queen had prepared herself for the feast, but her suspicions gnawed at her mind. Rumors, encrypted whispers, and intercepted messages had crafted a picture of danger, her own son's growing ambition, his clandestine dealings, and the treachery that lurked behind palace walls. The meal was served on fine porcelain plates, dishes piled high with delicacies fit for royalty. Among them, a bowl of richly scented herbal soup, rumored to be a favorite of the Queen's. As she reached for her portion, her hand trembled slightly. She dismissed it as nervousness. But what she did not realize was that the subtle hint of a toxin had already begun to take hold of her system. Unbeknownst to all, hidden within the ornate folds of her silk robe, was a tiny vial containing a slow-acting poison. Perhaps a carefully prepared herb, such as aconite, notorious for its potency, or a meticulously extracted toxin from poisonous insects, slipped into her food by a trusted, yet secretly treacherous, servant or poison artisan. The act was delicate, precise, a clandestine insertion designed to appear as an ordinary part of the meal, the type of subtle manipulation that only the most skilled assassin or poisoner could execute. As the Queen's lips touched the stolen morsel, her pulse fluttered inexplicably. What began as a faint dizziness quickly escalated into a searing pain radiating through her chest and limbs. Her vision blurred, and she clutched at her throat in a desperate attempt to breathe. Her regal composure shattered in a matter of moments, replaced by agonized gasps and a tumult of confusion. Her mind, once sharp and incisive, drifted into darkness, leaving behind only a whisper of her suffering, a tragic portrait of betrayal. Meanwhile, her son watched in cold silence, his face an unreadable mask. To the untrained eye, he seemed composed, almost indifferent, yet inside he battled conflicting emotions. To attain his ambitions, he had orchestrated her demise, carefully calculating the poison's onset to ensure her death would appear natural or accidental. That night, he walked away from the scene with a calm that betrayed no guilt. Instead, he bore the weight of his calculated ruthlessness as a necessary step toward power. Evidence of his guilt was subtle but mounting. Little clues, discarded empty vials, suspicious powders, or a dusting of a rare, lethal herb were hidden in the shadows of the palace corridors. Some courtiers suspected, whispering behind closed doors, pointing fingers at the prince's growing influence and whispered promises of loyalty to the emperor. Yet no open accusations could be made. The palace was rife with intrigue, and the truth was often buried beneath layers of deception. Modern forensic analysis of remnants found on the meal's serving utensils or artifacts uncovered at the crime scene would reveal traces of potent toxins, echoing the dark secrets of that night. Even centuries later, scholars have debated whether her death was an accident or an act of deliberate murder, a question often lost to the silence of history's shadows. As dawn broke, the palace awoke to the grim reality. A beloved queen was gone, felled by what appeared to be natural causes, but was in truth a carefully concealed murder. Her death sent ripples through the court, igniting rumors, suspicions, and a fragile web of alliances that teetered on the edge of collapse. The prince's rule was now under suspicion, his path to the throne secured yet shadowed by the deadly secret he had kept. In the end, the poisoned feast became a symbol of palace treachery, a reminder that beneath the veneer of civility and grandeur, the pursuit of power often came at the expense of those most cherished. In the dim corridors of history's forgotten chambers, whispers of treachery often fade into silence, but some secrets refuse to die. Among these is the haunting suspicion that the beloved queen of the Tang Dynasty met her brutal end not by accident or natural causes, but through a carefully plotted conspiracy involving her own flesh and blood. The shadows cast by this treachery stretch far beyond her tragic demise, echoing into the very foundations of palace power, and leaving behind fragments of evidence that continue to tantalize modern scholars. At the heart of this dark tale lies a series of cryptic clues buried deep within the remnants of ancient artifacts and scattered court records. For centuries, many of these documents have been dismissed or deliberately obscured, their honest truths masked by political propaganda or the embellishments of poets eager to romanticize tales of palace romance and tragedy. Yet, recent archaeological discoveries have reopened these long-closed chapters of history, revealing residues of substances that could only be produced by poisons, substances that at the time were famously concealed within delicacies and drinks served at court banquets. One such artifact is a fragment of porcelain from the imperial kitchen, intriguingly stained with traces of a bitter herbaceous residue. Modern chemical analysis identified these traces as a potent concoction of herbs and mineral compounds known to be used for clandestine poisoning. The herbal mixture was likely designed to induce a swift, uncontrollable death, precisely what was observed in the Queen's final moments. Her symptoms aligned with known poisonings: sudden paralysis, exquisite pain, and eventual coma. This residue's chemical fingerprint matched historical descriptions of a rare and deadly herb called wugua, known in clandestine circles for its lethal potency, especially when combined with certain mineral poisons. Further, scholars examining the palace's secret chambers have uncovered hidden compartments within the wall cavities, containing small vials and containers. These containers, fashioned from jade, porcelain, or even wood, were often used to hide toxic substances intended for covert use. Interestingly, one such vial was found with traces of arsenic, a notorious poison in ancient China, along with an unidentified amber herb extract. The presence of these substances suggests a methodical approach to assassination, with subtle dosing designed to leave no immediate suspicion, but lethal enough to eliminate even the most wary victim. Historical records bolster these physical findings with accounts of court intrigue. During the period leading up to the Queen's mysterious death, several court officials reported seeing her imbibe special teas and delicacies prepared by trusted palace chefs, yet mysteriously, These were sometimes accompanied by secretly added herbs or substances that only a select few could have known how to use effectively. Poignant letters retrieved from the emperor's secret archives, long hidden from public view, hint at clandestine meetings and whispered warnings. One letter, penned in elegant calligraphy, alludes to a gift from the shadows, believed by historians to hint at the covert nature of the poisoning plan. Adding weight to suspicion are the accounts of palace eunuchs and poison artisans whose testimonies, though often considered unreliable, align with the narrative of a carefully orchestrated conspiracy. Eunuchs who once served in the inner sanctum recall the presence of individuals unassociated with usual court duties, men who moved discreetly, carrying small bags or vials wrapped in silk. Their whispered confessions, passed down through generations, suggest that an elite circle within the palace was involved in secreting poisons into the queen's food and drink, executed with surgical precision to avoid detection. Modern forensic analysis now provides a frightening dimension to these ancient clues. Sampling residues from the artifacts and relics associated with the Queen's last days, experts have confirmed the presence of multiple toxic agents, not just arsenic, but also deadly alkaloids and herbs that act swiftly upon ingestion. These discoveries point to a well-planned death, orchestrated by individuals who knew exactly how to conceal their guilt. In particular, the combination of mineral poisons and herbal extracts demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of toxicology, likely the work of poison artisans whose expertise was valued and feared within court circles. The convergence of physical evidence and historical records paints a chilling portrait of a conspiracy rooted in ambition and fear. The Queen's influence threatened the delicate balance of power within the palace, and her son's desire for unchallenged authority may have driven him to orchestrate her demise. Her death, cloaked in silence and neglect, was not a happenstance but a meticulously planned act of betrayal, a conclusion reinforced by the forensic traces that stubbornly resist denial. Yet, many questions still linger. How did the poisoners manage to slip their deadly payload past her guards and attendants? Did the Queen suspect her son, and was her death a desperate act born out of suspicion? Modern analysis cannot fully reveal the identities of those responsible, but the residues and the fragments of ancient correspondence make one thing clear. The shadows in the palace held dark secrets, secrets that eventually claimed the life of a noblewoman whose influence was still felt, even in her death. As history continues to peel back its layers, the evidence of this conspiracy remains a stark reminder of the lethal game of shadows played within the imperial court. In the shadowed halls of the Tang Dynasty palace, where power and treachery danced like flickering flames, the story of a queen's tragic end remains one of the most haunting secrets buried beneath marble floors and velvet drapes. Her name has long been forgotten by history's relentless tide, but her fate, sealed with poison by her own flesh and blood, serves as an enduring emblem of ambition's destructive force. Her legacy, once luminous with grace and intelligence, was consigned to darkness, overshadowed by betrayal and the insidious whisper of treacherous intent. It was a time when the empire basked in cultural brilliance, yet beneath this veneer of prosperity lurked the deadly game of palace politics. The Queen, a woman of noble lineage and formidable intellect, had risen to prominence amid the turbulent waters of court intrigue. Her political acumen earned her allies, enemies, and many jealously guarded secrets. She navigated these perilous waters with poise, always aware that the spotlight of favor could swiftly turn to suspicion. And yet, what she could not foresee was that her own son, driven by a hunger for power, would stage her fall, a betrayal cloaked in silence, sealed with poison. Her relationship with her son was outwardly tender, filled with the superficial trappings of filial devotion. Court whispers, however, hinted at a growing divide. Behind closed doors, a war waged in hushed voices and furtive glances. The prince, once a boy eager for his mother's approval, grew increasingly ambitious, his allegiance torn between his affection for her and an insatiable desire for the throne. Rumors swirled that he viewed her as an obstacle to his ascent, a threat that had to be eliminated. The night of her death, the palace was cloaked in an eerie stillness. A feast had been arranged, an opulent display of courtly grandeur, where delicacies from across the empire were served. The Queen, unaware of the lurking danger, sampled the food, her senses gradually succumbing to a growing numbness. Her last moments were a tumult of confusion and despair as her body betrayed her, convulsing with agonizing pain. Witnesses later recounted her final breaths, her skin paling, her eyes searching desperately in the shadows for salvation. And standing quietly in the corner was her son, the man who had once seemed to love her. His face remained calm, unreadable, an expression that hid a storm of guilt, resolve, and cold calculation. Evidence would later suggest he orchestrated the poisoning, perhaps with the help of palace eunuchs or poison artisans skilled in the clandestine arts of death. Whether he personally slipped the lethal herbs into her meal or if other dark instruments were employed in the shadows remains a matter of speculation and legend. In the aftermath, court records are conflicted. Some accounts vilify the prince as a ruthless killer, consumed by emasculating ambition. Others suggest he was a victim of palace intrigue, framed by jealous rivals. Poetic verses from later courtiers mourned the queen's tragic fate, describing her as a fallen flower, a victim of palace darkness. Archaeological findings, such as residues on ancient artifacts and cryptic inscriptions, offer tangible hints of poison's clandestine use, confirming the sinister nature of her death. Today, her story is fragmented, obscured by layers of silence, political cover-ups, and the passage of centuries. Her personal legacy, once marked by grace and influence, was deliberately erased from the collective memory. The palace, once vibrant with her presence, became a mausoleum of secrets, its corridors whispering tales of treachery and lost innocence. The immediate aftermath of her demise was chaos. Power vacuum, skepticism, and conspiracies roiled within the palace walls. Her son, now emperor, ascended the throne, but his reign was haunted by suspicion and accusations. Many believed her death was a catalyst for endless palace disputes, each faction vying to control the narrative of her demise. Her legacy was deliberately obscured, her historia transformed into a cautionary tale about the destructive nature of greed and the perils of familial betrayal. Over time, her story faded into legend, an almost mythic warning about the lethal costs of ambition. Her memory was suppressed within official histories, but among the court and in clandestine whispers, her figure persisted, a symbol of innocence betrayed and life cut short by the corrupting influence of power. Her fate served as a dark mirror of what can happen when love, loyalty, and desire for dominance collide in the perilous chessboard of royal loyalty. In the shadows of history, the Queen's tragic end continues to remind us that beneath grandeur often lurks darkness, secrets of betrayal, greed, and the deadly silence of power. Her story questions how many other forgotten figures silently suffered in the shadows, victims of the very throne they sought to uphold. It is a story that echoes through generations, warning us that even those closest to us can become agents of destruction when ambition clouds the human heart. As the centuries have passed, her name may have been lost, but her story remains etched in the dark corners of history, a testament to a queen who fell not by external enemies, but by the hand of her own flesh and blood, poisoned by the darkness that dwelled within her dynasty. Her legacy, once a beacon of wisdom and grace, was clandestinely poisoned in the shadows, becoming a silent, haunting testament to the tragic costs of ambition unrestrained.